Okay, it's 11 o'clock and we are at our final two talks of today. We have some exciting talks coming up tomorrow as well, so I hope people will join us a couple of hours later. So it'll start at, I think, 2 p.m. Central European time, 8 a.m. Eastern US time. Still early for our West Coast, Western Hemispherians, but unfortunately, that's where we're at here. All right, let's get into it. So here's our next talk. Why don't you go ahead and get started?
Perfect, thank you. Um, well, so I'll be presenting this talk about variable constituent order in Mapudungun, semantics, information structure, and construals. I'll be starting presenting the language, then the antecedents and theoretical framework, objectives, data and sample, methodology, and finally, results and conclusions. The language is called Mapudungun, also known as Mapuche, and in the old days, a very old-fashioned name now, but still sometimes used in the literature, Araucanian. And it's spoken in the ancient territory in both South Chile and Argentina, as you can see here on the map. It has roughly 200,000 speakers. It's a language isolate with tendencies both towards polysynthesis and agglutination of the verb. It indexes both the subject and the primary object in the verb, and it has no obligatory argument encoding, NP encoding of the arguments. This is a topic I've been wondering about since I started studying the language. When one starts studying the language, you are taught that you could say either Inche Santiago Melen, as you can see here in 1A, which means I live in Santiago with the pronoun in initial position, or Santiago Melen Inche with the pronoun in final position, or you could also just say Santiago Melen without using the pronoun, the subject pronoun. The same for transitive clauses. Here in 2, you have Maria Lufikovke Juan, but it could be also just Maria Lufikovke, or you could omit the subject pronoun as well. So, few descriptions of word order exist for the language. It has been said that it's highly flexible with both SV or VS order. 3 orders are possible in transitive clauses according to Rivano, SVO, SOV, and VOS. Smets recognized some preferential patterns. According to her, subject is final in intransitives and the agent first in transitives. And according to Zuniga, it is preferentially or it could be either SV or VS, but preferentially SVO. According to Walls, it's considered SVO, as you can see here in the map. I'm working following the definitions of basic or dominant word order, which is considered based on frequency by some authors or based on markedness by some others. I'm also using both the classical typology of the 6-way typology and the 4-way typology, SVVS and plus OVBO typologies, and working with analysis of information structure following mainly Melchuk and Tremblay and Beck. The objectives are first, identify the most frequent dominant order in Mapudungun intransitive and transitive classes, describe the factors that influence the preference for different orders, and discuss the possible differences between dominant and basic word orders in Mapudungun. Data was collected during an ethnographic field work in South Chile. We have 9 conversational interviews in Mapudungun, roughly 55 words, and participants were 4 women and 2 men, plus 1 interviewer, all raised in the community, all very proficient in the language, just one monolingual, all the rest, all the 8 other speakers, bilingual Spanish, Mapudungun, and 2 of them followed Western formal education outside the community. I worked then with a sample of this. This is conversational, annotated corpus. The interviews were recorded, transcribed, and marked up, added. And I worked with the 15 first minutes of each interview. The texts were segmented by clauses, and when present inside clauses, segmented by intonational units. All intransitive and transitive, declarative and final clauses were identified in the first 15 minutes of each interview and were annotated for transitivity, presence of full NPs, word order, and semantic information structure factors. And a data frame was created and frequencies were obtained and compared. Finally, I discussed the factors. So the general results are, as you can see here, that most of the data is formed by intransitive clauses, 65% of the data, just the rest 35 by monotransitive, by both monotransitive and ditransitive clauses. And if we look at the argument encoding as NPs, we see that in fact a big proportion of it, almost half of the data, has encoding of has full encoding of the NPs of the that most of it is intransitive, 36%, and just overall we have 11% of full encoding for transitives. So there are not very many transitive with full encoding of the NPs. So this raises the question and makes better to investigate both intransitive and transitives and full encoding and partial encoding. When using the traditional 6-way typology, I found that 4 orders are in fact used. The most frequent is SVO, and almost as frequent as VOS. Here, both of them with 30 something, more or less 1/3 of the data each, then OVS, and finally SOV. No results, no examples for VSO and OSV, which will be important for the discussion. So according to this typology, we could say that the language is both SVO and VOS, and so probably not very according to this typology. But let's recall that this is built just with 11% of the data. So now I'm going to the 4-way typology, or the 2-way typology with 2 factors and 2 possible orders. And according to this typology, most of the, if we look at the SV order, I mean the order of subject in relation to the verb, most of the clauses, in fact, more than 2 times of the clauses are VS. So subject final. As you can see, 71%. And when we look at the object, the position of the object in relation to the verb, we see that there is no a big difference. In fact, VO is more frequent, but it's not at least 2 times bigger as it is required, at least by Dreyer, in order to consider that VO would be the dominant order. So according to this, the language would be classified and not really sure if it could be classified as VO, at least not according to Dreyer. Let's look now at the factors.
Rodrigo, your audio is going in and out. I don't know if it's an internet issue or a mic issue, but I just wanted to make you aware of that.
So you can hear now?
Yes, now is working. It's just sometimes going out. Anyway, continue. But I just, in case you're touching your microphone or something, I wanted to let you know. Okay.
Yeah.
All right,
yeah.
keep going.
I think I'm not doing anything wrong. Sorry, I'm so sorry. Well, hopefully you could you'll be able to hear most of what remains to be said. So finally, the factors. If we look at the factors, we could see that the SV order is used especially in cases of new and prominent or contrastive discourse topics, whereas the S order, that is subject final order, is used whenever the subject argument codifies a discourse active referent. As we will see here in the example number 3, I didn't use interlinear glosses because it's too long, but you could see that here the discourse topic, the theme of the clause, as well is Kinye Kushe Papai, an old lady, which appears in initial position. Then the subject is indexed here at the end of the verb, and it's the same the same theme reappears in many clauses without being appearing as an NP. And then the topic changes, and then it reappears in line 14 as the topic again. She said something, and then she knew something, and then it reappears as a full MP, Hikushe Papai, the old lady, but now in final position. So this is a typical example of how when the topic appears first, when it's introduced as a discourse topic, especially a prominent discourse topic, it appears in initial position. And then if it reappears as a full MP, it could be the case that it just reappears in final. We also have the VERS order here in red when the subject is new but generic, non-specific, or inanimate. Here in 4, you can see that in black, you have the same case. The pichikiche, which are the kids, appear as the are introduced pre-verbal position, and then at the end in final position when it is already a given. In contrast, these two things, subjects, which are not the topic in case, appear both in final position. Both are generic and inanimate. Similarly, we have here we have four, in fact, four subjects, which could be considered the themes of each clause, and all of them are either generic or non-specific, but all inanimate. And they all appear in final position. So here the ritual is not good, the days are not good, the things are not good, and the land is not well anymore. Regarding the object position, the VO order is preferred more frequently, as we can see here in 6 and 7. For example, here in Chiang Mai, Tanya Mapuchengan, Tanya Kenta Choyen, here Choyen, children is the object, and it appears in final position, which is in fact animate. And here we have inanimate object. We have life, so we are alive, but it is codified as an object, an NP, again in final position. In contrast, we have OV or OVS order in clauses in which O is co-referential with the discourse topic and is presented as the theme or the topic of the clause, as we could see here. So that thing, I always tell that thing. And here the thing that I talk about is presented in initial position, and it's the discourse topic. Or when the object is rhematic and deemed more newsworthy, as here in 9. For example, here, the all things, I don't deny them. I used here the object initial translation in English, although it's not the most idiomatic one. And in few cases, we have SOV order, so the same order, OV order, and these cases are preferred when both S and O are presented as salient. For example, here, Inche, which is myself, I, the Fei, that thing, I always, I was always told that. Finally, Mapudungun constituent order seems to follow the newsworthy things first principle by Mithon, 1992, and it's used for new discourse topics, rhematic segments, and especially segments presented as prominent. They all go first in the utterance. In addition, it seems to follow, the language seems to follow quote, more topical at the edges principle. So only SVO, VOS, OS, OVS, and SOV orders are used. We never have the subject in middle position. So the subject is always at the beginning or at the end of the clause. And from a markedness perspective, we could say, although I didn't argue about this in detail here in the presentation, we could say that we could argue that VOS, VS, and VO are used in more communicative contexts. They introduce new themes, theme continuity, prominence of rime, and new information, so they could be considered the unmarked and following the frequency approach, we would say that dominant orders, there is no single traditional dominant order, but it would be VS and both VO and OV. But following an markedness approach, we would say that the basic word orders are VOS. So the basic order don't match completely, we would say, regarding the position of the object. And the basic approach. And finally, I would say that previous scholars were right in identifying flexible order in Mapudungun, but failed to recognize the OVS order, overgeneralized the use of SVO and transitives, and identified the importance of topicality, but disregarded other communicative theme and giveness. And yeah, there are still some things that needs to be addressed. For example, most frequent and unmarked word orders in other genres, and the contribution of age to preference of VO versus OV order, which is a thing that very much.
All right, thank you so much. We do have some time for questions. Remember, you can raise your hand or ask the question in the chat. Dina has a question. Dina, so she asks, this seems a little bit like what Ava said, so maybe I'll just unmute you actually, Dina. Yeah, you can ask your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, so this reminds me a little bit of what Eva was talking about in Jaminjung before. So you have the agents or subjects in initial position, but not always. And when you have them in initial positions, it seems that they are new topics or topic changes maybe. So my question was, did you make any observations about what Eva showed about the prosody of the topical constituent in the beginning and when it's in the end?
Mm-hmm. No, I haven't. I haven't worked with prosody yet, I would say, because I'm working in this project as a work in progress. But yeah, I definitely would do it. I think I will do it. And yeah, unfortunately, I was not able to hear the first talks of this workshop. But yeah, what I could say about not exactly prosody, but stress in the language, the language has been described as a variable stress language, which means that a single word, especially dissyllables, could be stressed in either syllable without any change of physical meaning. And a previous investigation by me showed that the position of stress is influenced, among other factors, by information structure. So if the typical pattern, the most frequent pattern is final stress, but if the dissyllable is stressed in the first syllable, is much more probable that the word is being focalized.
Okay, yeah, thank you. Thanks.
And that appears more in the beginning of the class.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Awesome. So Charlie, would you like, I can just allow you to talk and you can ask your question in person. So I'll do that. So you can go ahead and talk if you want.
Okay, can you hear me? Yeah. So I think, given the SV and the VS order you talked about, and also given the information status of the subjects, it seems that the language you talk about is against the general tendency of placing the good information before new information. So just curious about, are you aware of any other languages related to Mapudungun that also use the newsworthy things first principle?
Oh, I'm not aware of any language related to Mapudungun because there are not languages phylogenetically related.
Mhm.
If we follow a narrow approach, the most accepted studies about linguistic families and genus, and but yeah. But there are other languages, indigenous languages from the Americas that have this pattern. I don't think it's an unusual pattern. It was thought as an unusual pattern back in the beginning of the studies of the functional census perspective. It was thought that the rim would come always at the end, but yeah, it's not an unusual pattern, I think.
Yeah, that's also make me think, whether it's kind of aerial phenomenon. In some areas, maybe we see such cases more often.
Yeah, you're right. Even if they are not phylogenetically related languages, I could look at the area, and sorry, I haven't looked at some related languages, some aerially related languages. The first one would be Quechua, which is a very known language and very widely spoken. So yeah, there are definitely some languages worthy investigating. And in addition, Quechua has both topic and focus or rim markers, morphological markers, I mean. So yeah, it would be worth investigating, but I haven't yet.
So Tim just said in our panelist chat that these tendencies seem to be similar to what's going on in Spanish as well. So that might be another close by. I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but that might also be something.
Yeah, I think there are some similarities. In fact, there are some similarities. But I don't think that at least some of these patterns could be attributed to contact with Spanish, because some of the patterns seems to be in fact even more prominent for the only monolingual speaker I have. So as I said, I think it's important for me later to go and study some possible relation between age and also bilingualism and the preferential patterns. And I think that it seems, at least until this moment, that it seems that monolingual patterns and older, monolingual speakers and especially older speakers seem to prefer object final position more than younger speakers, but I haven't gone into detail about that.
Yes, and Tim also says it could be a coincidence or just another example of a language as well, or a product of content.
I think it's a coincidence in some of the patterns. For example, the fact that inanimate and non-specific and generic subjects tend to appear at the end, and animate, more agentive subjects tend to appear in the beginning. but I don't think it's a coincidence in all the patterns we saw, because some of these patterns are, in fact, do appear in Spanish, but not all of them.
Thanks. Sorry, Tim, I should have just unmuted or like had you speak up. I just wanted to say quickly because it was a comment, but anyway, so I'm sorry about that. Okay, so thank you very much for that talk. So exciting work. And let's switch over to our final presenter of today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.